The startup scene in Australia is terrific, and it's in the top 20 worldwide. I grew up in the Pilbara, so I was born in Mount Tom Price, which is in the middle of nowhere. I think the curiosity and the creative part of me pushed me out to the startup world. So what is your unique selling proposition? What is your value proposition? So how do you talk to customers? What value are you giving them? Always start with the customer in mind. Mindset is everything. And honestly, that's the first thing I look for in a founder. If you can actually understand customer discovery and the customer journey and user experience, that is going to be your differentiator. Make sure that your story and your brand have been developed in a way that are different to your competitors, and that your story resonates in a way that they don't. I think the startup space, as I mentioned, was fairly immature when I was running GoFetch. Being rum and positive is good, but yes, getting things done faster is absolutely vital.
Where big dreams meet bold action. Where we share real stories, actionable insights, and the inspiration needed to transform your ideas into businesses. Are you ready to turn your ideas into success and be an inspiration to others? Join Inspirepreneur.
I grew up in the Pilbara, so I was born in Mount Tom Price, which is in the middle of nowhere, so right up near Broome. And so I went to school in Karratha, Tom Price, and then moved over to Melbourne when I was about 15 years old, and then finished school and university here before travelling the world, and lived in France and Indonesia, Sydney. And then my whole family sort of moved back to Melbourne in our early 30s. And that's me, that's how I started to live in Victoria. And now I live in the bush up in regional Victoria, about 2 hours out of Melbourne. I think my family pushed me to the business side. I think my parents sort of wanted that. I think the curiosity and the creative part of me escaped that and pushed me out to the startup world, if you like. So I was very business-minded in my 20s and 30s. I was always quite entrepreneurial. But I do think that the seeds of trying to grow something and in business came from my parents. But I think that the creative side kind of pushed me, my natural creative side pushed me into other endeavours that sort of the digital world opened up. Dad was a mining engineer, so he worked for Lang Hancock, who basically started Hammersley Iron. So Dad he went to the Kalgoorlie School of Mines, and then when the Pilbara opened up in the late 60s, he started up there, and there was nobody up there at that time. So I think his rent was $8 a week. So it was very affordable, and Lang Hancock, who's Gina Reinhardt's father, he wanted everybody to come up and start working in the mines. So I spent, all of my childhood was up there, which was just idyllic, because Dampier was on the coast, but also had that red dirt. So it was just quite dramatic, the landscape, and a lovely place to grow up. And then my mum was a nurse and a flight attendant. So they met on a plane. So Dad was doing some mining in Port Moresby, and Mum was on the Port Moresby-Darwin flight, and they met on a plane, and he proposed 4 days later. So they were married for 50 years. Mum's passed now, but they were married for 50 years from that flight. Okay, I went backpacking for 2.5 years after, because in Western Australia they didn't have kindergarten. I finished school quite young. So I had my first degree by 20, which was a Bachelor of Arts Commerce from Monash. And then from 20 to 23, I just travelled. And I based myself in France and sort of went everywhere. But when I got back, I applied for a graduate program at Qantas and was successful. So I started in Melbourne, sort of rotating around different departments, and found myself in marketing, and that took me to Sydney. So in Sydney, in a suburb called Mascot, right near the airport, is where Qantas's head office is. So I worked on the Japan route in marketing and yield management, trying to maximise revenue per flight. And then from there, I just really loved marketing. So they paid for my MBA at UTS, the University of Technology in Sydney. And then from there, I came back to Melbourne and just started really progressing career-wise in senior marketing roles with Beckton Property Group, Salter Property, so bit of property, bit of energy. I was at AGL, Origin, Simply Energy, and then some infrastructure projects like Transurban and Vic Urban. So I was doing all of those things, kind of in an ambitious way. I really did want to progress. So really loved that rigor. Really got to experience how similar the marketing fundamentals are in different sectors. They're really not that different. Even FMCG, like Coca-Cola or fast-moving consumables, I don't feel they're that different to services. The fundamentals are the same, and I think, in all honesty, that background set myself up for where I am now, for both my startup as well as what I did after my startup. One is the customer journey. So always start with the customer in mind. With marketing, really, when you do enter any segment, you've got to do your situation analysis and just understand where the company is in the marketplace and what your competitors are doing, but also what the customer experience is like. If you can actually understand customer discovery and the customer journey and user experience, that is going to be your differentiator. I think I was just saying to you before that the companies don't tell people what their brand stands for anymore, they tell you. It's a digital world, it's two-way, there's TripAdvisor, there's Google reviews. You really do have to focus on the customer journey and make sure that somebody in your company is ringing that toll-free number and see what that experience is like and map the key moments of a customer's journey and try to standardise the way you respond to those so that there's a way or your brand is known for consistently delivering things in a certain way. So that's number one. So customer experience, customer journey, customer discovery. Number two, I would say, is really differentiation. So what is your unique selling proposition? What is your value proposition? So how do you talk to customers in a way that doesn't involve money or things? What value are you giving them? And a lot of people don't drill into that enough. Value proposition leads to unique selling proposition. Your USP is comparative. It's where you sit against your competitors. So why would they choose you? Why would they not leave you? All of those things come down to your unique selling proposition and your messaging. But the third thing I would say is work on the things that the customer wants, not what you want. So it's very easy to, I think, fall into the habit of defaulting to things you like, whether it's coding or whether it's graphic design, social media. They're things that might pique your interest, but are they serving the customer? Are they really helping you get more of them, have the ones that you've got buy more, and have all of your customers be fans and advocate for you? So I think that point three is linked to point one. So the customer experience and all of that stuff is linked basically to that final point about just making sure that you are doing everything within your business with the customer in mind. Sure, there's the head of Scandinavian Airways, I can't remember his name, it's something that sounds like it's very Swedish. He invented this thing called the moments of truth, and you basically map all of the key moments that a customer might have with your brand. It could be, I need a hammer, then you've got all these options. Okay, I'm going to go to Bunnings, I'll buy the hammer, I'll check out, the hammer arrives, you get a receipt. Every single major customer touch point, you need to actually standardise the way that you respond. So the main ones could be a phone call, one could be a text message, one could be something written. What is the way that you respond to each of these key moments? So my answer to you would be just map your moments of truth, the big moments and the small ones, but standardise the way that you manage the big ones. The little ones, that can go to different departments. But make sure that you get the big moments right and they're replicable, they become known as your process, people come to expect them. But it's also just very good for you as a discipline to actually start responding to customers' needs at the right time, via the right channel, with the right message. I don't think companies check enough what the actual customer experience is like. Even when you ring a phone number, I rang my insurance company yesterday, and it was horrendous. It was just push this number, now push this number, now push this number, enter your customer number. It was 30 minutes of nonsense. And I don't think anybody in the executive is checking enough what the actual customer experience is like. And it's honestly just knowing that that's how they handle a front of house experience. It just makes me anxious about what other bad experiences there are internally. So you've just got to get it right. You've just got to really walk in the customer's shoes as often as you can and bring technology into that as well. So we were talking about AI before. You do have to stay current with all of these things, and you shouldn't fear them. They do make things better, and you just need to standardize how tech gets into your processes and to your customer service, and just embrace it. Honestly, it's with all the big data now, you're going to learn so much about your customers, and how long they stay on the phone. All of these behaviours can be captured, and you can improve just by embracing this technology. Okay, when I was after Sydney, I was in a good pattern of just progressing career-wise, and buying houses and settling down a little bit. But I had a calling to actually. I knew that 9 to 5 working for somebody else was not going to be for me, and I was frustrated by just the monotony of it, I think. So I had a bunch of startup ideas, and when apps first arrived, I remember being at a party and somebody got an Uber Black, and I was like, what is this magic? And then a limousine rocked up, and I was like, this is incredible. And I remember being on a beach in Bali, because I've always had a love affair with Bali, and I was sitting there just looking at all these incredible apps that were being developed. And my own frustration back in Melbourne was, as a senior manager, you're working long hours, you're travelling a lot. I never made it home in time for the chemist, or to pick up medicines, or to go to the dry cleaner. So I was looking for a way to address work-life balance and address issues to do with working long hours and not being available to go and get things. And I came across this idea of like a butler service, a personal butler service for you. And it was called Concierge 3182, because I lived in St Kilda. And what I was going to do is get your butcher, your baker, your florist, all of these companies working in like a program where a school kid could go and collect all of these things for you and leave them on your door. And it was called Concierge 3182, and I was going to replicate that across Melbourne, because Melbourne's really a bunch of little villages like Richmond and Elwood, and so it was 3182, 3184, 3121, and I was embellishing that and trying to work out how that might work when apps arrived. And I thought, you know what, I could appify this rather than have it be a website and something that you might promote through schools or what have you. I ended up developing the app to a point that I had quite a good business plan and a good tech roadmap in relation to the sorts of features I wanted to include. So that was one idea, and I had many others. But when I was working at one of these companies corporately, PAYG, I was sitting next to somebody who listened to ideas all day long. It was a family office, so the company was run by a wealthy family, and their son looked after their investments. And I would hear these startups come and pitch all the time, and I ran my idea by him, and he liked it, and that really validated for me the concept. And then I had a very tricky decision about whether I stay at this job that I actually really loved, or go and do this thing. And I just felt compelled to give it a go. So I left probably my favourite ever job to go and do this, and the rest is history. They're huge. Two things. You've got to have an appetite for risk, but I do think that as you get older, it becomes inevitable. It's not really a choice. You come to really, you don't want to go to your grave wondering what if. And I think if you're one of two people. You're either happy to stay there and enjoy the security of that, or you have to jump because it's a calling, and your curiosity gets the better of you, and it becomes an obsession. And I don't really think it is a choice because that obsession, healthy or unhealthy, it does force you to make the leap. I would say now, though, that the leap is less precarious than when I did it. Even 10 years ago, because GoFetch launched in 2015, there were no cohorts, there were no co-working spaces, there was no infrastructure. The startup scene in Australia is terrific, and it's in the top 20 worldwide, especially Melbourne. So I do think that there's less risks now. There is a way to check your minimum viable product. There's a way to get ready to go to market and test the concept quite thoroughly before you take the leap or before you spend too much of your own money. So yeah, look, I think it's unavoidable if you have a passion for your idea and you don't want anyone else to run it. That is always an option. You can get another CEO in to run it, but that's hard to find, especially when you're just at the idea stage and not proven. So it's a calling, it's a passion, it's a risk, but what else are you going to do? I don't think we were set up structurally for investment. So when I was going out there cap in hand to raise more money, you had a couple of the big VCs like Blackbird and what have you, but their model is very risk averse. They want to see you almost cash flow positive before they come in. So I do think the VCs, as much as they're good, they take a lot of the cream, and they're not really with you as a founder on the risk journey. I think what's happened now is, first of all, Malcolm Turnbull launched the Innovation Grant. So there's a lot of R&D grants available where startup founders can write off the tech expenses. So there's a lot of stuff that happened at the tax level and the government support level that were really good. But I think when the Innovation Grant and the system happened, I think the press that got opened a lot of high net wealth individuals up to the concept of having a go at some of these startups. And you look at somebody like Melanie Perkins from Canva. She launched just before me, and I remember watching a show on Australian Story about these 5 startups, and she was one of them, her and Cliff. And I can't believe that they captured her on film as one of 5 random startups that ended up doing so well. But I do think that she benefited, from what I understand, from some of the investment that she got quite early was high net wealth individuals. There was a lot of crowdfunding coming into play. There was a lot of different models for financing your startup beyond the VCs. But I think the millionaires and the high net wealth individuals, they came into it on the back of a couple of proof points, Atlassian, Canva, a couple of very big Australian names that made global headlines, as well as the infrastructure. There was another thing that came in, a tax thing called ESIC, which was an early stage investment certificate, I think. So you could actually come in with an ESIC approved company and your early stage investment money was not taxed. So there was a lot of back end stuff, financial stuff that really did whet the appetite of wealthy people to explore the startup world in Australia. And I think now I spoke last year at an event run by Megan from Australian Founders Club about the different ways you can raise money. I did friends and family and sort of bootstrapped, but then there was crowdsourcing, there was different versions of VCs, and then there's all these other new financial models coming in. I do think it's a really healthy ecosystem now for investment, and I think that every high net wealth person in Australia has got somebody briefing them about the startup space and what's happening in Melbourne and Sydney. And I think also they control the risk a bit by having their own advisors in, and I think that's very smart. So and even beyond the VC scene, there's a lot of companies now, even with me raising from some high net wealth individuals and angels and friends and family, a few of them were quite involved in the tech roadmap, advising from financial perspective, technology perspective. when you are putting money in, as you said, and you're playing more horses, you're spreading the risk. But when you've actually got your own team advising, you also have a bit more input, and you feel like you're in more control. And I think that's healthy. I think it's great. I mean, I ended up having a very good CTO and a very good CFO. And they were brilliant in terms of just helping me find R&D grants, spread the risk, prioritise the build and what features were going to be built next. So I think that it's great that there's a lot more options for finance, but it's also good when those people they have skin in the game and they're dependable resources for advice as well. I took the leap in November 2015. I left my day job, and I remember day one going into a co-working space, and I was like, new laptop, there I was sitting there thinking, okay, what have I just done? But with us, we got a lot of press early on. Because Uber had started, there were a lot of direct comparisons to us being like the Uber of things, where we were delivering peer-to-peer. So we had a workforce of willing fetchers and then customers placing the order, and then you could track it all. The one thing that we did very well from day one was media. And yeah, I think we're on Channel 9, we were on Sunrise, we got Huffington Post interested. So our brand awareness was better than our reality, than our operational robustness. But yeah, look, I think day one was all about how to launch the beta version. So the beta version of GoFetch was very, very small geographically. We were just the Melbourne CBD. So we were just experimenting along Collins Street with fetchers who were on foot, skateboard, bicycle, tram. We didn't care how they got their parcel there. They just had to talk with the customer. So we had a very high touch platform. So we had an operations person managing the dashboard, but the customer and the fetcher were talking directly to each other. So they said, look, I'm just going to do this one first. I'll be there in half an hour. Is that okay? So we became known very quickly as the high touch, high comms app. And a lot of the lawyers really loved it because they'd send a document out for signing, the fetch would wait, and then they'd do the other fetch back in. So the very first 4 months was all Melbourne CBD, and then we just gradually expanded our patch and introduced motorbikes, cars, and then finally trucks. We had heavy items. We could do pianos and all sorts of stuff. So it was quite an organic growth period geographically. So we didn't expand the patch until we were confident we had enough fetchers, that we had enough repeat business from our core corporate clients. So look, in answer to your question, it felt good. The very first few months felt controlled. We were working to a plan. The tech was building out. The feedback was good, and the media attention was there. Yeah, we actually did iOS first, and then a lot of receptionists in the city, they wanted a desktop version. So then we built the web app. But yeah, we did iOS first. Two things I will say. We had to adapt and pivot a lot. So back to what I was saying before about the customer experience. We didn't have a good one when we first launched. So we had mandatory photos. So you couldn't even set up a profile without a photo, which was just cumbersome, and we made people jump through unnecessary hoops to set up an account. So we found a lot of people dropping off before they finished setting up their account, and we just realised we had mandatory photo, and they might have been on a phone that wasn't theirs, or So we did make a few mistakes, but the one thing I would say that we did very well for the corporate side of town was listening to what they wanted. So the web app version became very, very popular. And then we didn't build Android until year 3. So most of our business was coming through web app or the iOS. But in terms of the journey to build all of those features, they were all research based. So we had a bunch of executive assistants come to our office for lunch and a 3-hour workshop about what they want to see on the app. And it came down to communication, guarantees, marine insurance. We had insurance on every item. No other delivery app was doing that. So if a fetcher broke something, that was covered. So in the end, we had more features on our app than any other app in Australia. So very feature rich by the end. But back to what I was saying to you before, you do have to make sure that your dev team is not just building things they enjoy building or they're curious about. They do have to be researched and they have to be things that customers want. So I think people default to what they most enjoy. And as a founder, that was for me marketing. So I think I went down the wormhole of really having a cool video, cool animation, getting ourselves into the media a lot. What I had to be mindful of as the founder was that I wasn't doing too much marketing and not enough customer inquiry or discovery, and not enough sales. I think the biggest thing I would caution any founder with is to never ever take the eye off BDM. Business development has to be above coding. It's got to be above tech. You've got to have your funnel and the process for getting things into the funnel and massaging that through from a lead to a meaningful interaction to a conversion to a purchase to another purchase to spreading the word, getting your network built out. All of that has got to come ahead of anything else, including marketing or dev. So yeah, I think that first 6 months was wonderful for learning all of that and really stopping myself from going down rabbit holes that weren't serving the growth of the business. The thought came to me from that concierge 3182 business. For me, I knew that there was going to be a lot of people out there who would use this. And I remember validating just with friends, saying, wouldn't it be great if we could just send somebody to go and get that? Like whether you're watching a movie and you've run out of popcorn, wouldn't it be great if somebody could just go down and get that? So those were the sorts of ideas or conversations that I was having a lot. And for 10 years, like everyone said, wouldn't it be great if this happened? And honestly, when I was lying on the beach in Bali, there was an app up there called Gojek, and it's still going and it's huge. That was really the validation for me. And Gojek does things like somebody coming to your house to do your makeup or somebody going and get your groceries. Obviously, the labour costs are a lot cheaper over there. But the idea of just anything, anytime, delivered by anyone, that was our tagline. So we had deliver your life back as our tagline. And that was basically like, for customers, it was don't go get it. Just you got your freedom again. Let them go get it. And for the fetchers, it was a call to arms. It was you can actually make some money doing this. And we paid more than any other app. So we were 80%, 80-20. So the fetcher got 80% of the job. And I think Uber at that stage was 60-40. And so we were very high paying. And so the supply side was actually better than the demand side for the first year. But look, I think the main inspiration for it was just the fact that there were delivery scenarios that could not be addressed by couriers or trucking companies. Things like earphones left at the gym, lunchbox to little Johnny at school. All of these C2C delivery scenarios had never been done before. So we launched with those in mind, and we're really going after mums and dads with the anything, anywhere, by anyone sort of tagline. That rapidly changed to B2B. But yeah, I think the C2C was what we launched with, and it helped get the brand out there just by how broad the scenarios were. I live and breathe pain points. It's actually the first thing I do, because now I'm a growth coach for startup founders. The very first thing I start with is value proposition and what are your 5 pain points. So pain points are everything, especially the customer's pain points. If you can really get into the fact that these receptionists in Collins Street, they don't like the fact that they can't talk to their couriers please guy or their TNT guy. It's just a faceless guy in a uniform who just gets a signature and drops it off. A lot of our the pain points that we addressed initially had to do with communication, and that was the part we built out very robustly initially. So a lot of these fetches were requested by the customer. So quite often they'd place a job and say, "Oh, can I get this guy again? Because he's great." So we ended up having, there's a guy called Twan who worked for us, who was just amazing. But everyone wanted Twan, and he was just the friendliest guy and a very good advocate for GoFetch. We made T-shirts and hats, and he used to wear them like he was an employee. It was just great. But I think the pain point that they had was communication, the impersonal nature of delivery, the fact that they couldn't see where it was, no insurance. All of those things they came out of the research of our customers. But the pain points for founders, it could be things like time. How do I get my time back? Why am I stuck in operations? So getting into pain points is absolutely vital. And what I do is I cap it at 5, and then you tick those off. And if you're addressing pain points constantly, then you think of another 5. You basically do smooth out the business very quickly. So over the course of and the other thing is your 5 dreams. So you've got to let the customer or with me now as a coach, if I'm dealing with other founders, I've got to capture their dreams as well as their pain points, so that you're working towards both. So they do feel like, oh, I just achieved that one. You've got to celebrate it. So when you do tick off a pain point or you achieve a dream, you do have to celebrate, and we do target, stretch, celebrate. So what's the bare minimum? What's something that you can do that would be recognised as exceeding the goal or reducing the pain? And number 3 is celebrate. How do you knock it out of the park? And what are you going to do when that happens? So yeah, look, pain points is linked to reward, and I do in all elements of my life, I've always got a little list of 5 that I'm working towards addressing. Mindset is everything. And honestly, that's the first thing I look for in a founder as I'm coaching now is what is their mindset and how hungry are they? I can get more excited for somebody's idea than they are, and that's not good. So the 4 things I get them to focus on in terms of mindset is sustainable growth. So they've got to have growth as a real part of their mindset. They've got to be growing non-stop, whether it's the team, growing their processes, growing revenue, growing awareness. So they've got to have a growth mindset. Number 2 is they've got to be flexible. They've got to be willing to pivot. Any founder who gets stuck in their way and like, this is my idea and this is what I want to build, we had to pivot a lot. Like, for example, the C2C thing I mentioned before about lunchboxes to the kids and earphones at the gym, that wasn't a very big part of our set of jobs for the day. Probably less than 5% were C2C and just personal delivery scenarios. We ended up getting a lot more business from our competitors. So you'd have traditional couriers who would have forgotten one item and they'd have to send a big truck back to go and do that one delivery. They started using GoFetch. So we end up getting more work from our competitors than anybody else. So you've got to pivot and you've got to be really aware of what's not working, what you wanted to happen versus what the reality is telling you. You've got to keep that flexibility. The third thing is KPIs. You've got to work to key points, key things that you need to judge your own performance and the tech performance, the team performance. You've got to have very tangible KPIs that you're working to. And the final thing is communication. So anybody who doesn't have a communication mindset and they're keeping their toys to themselves, that's not good. So I find you've got to respect your investors, people who are on the journey with you. You've got to communicate a lot and just be really transparent about what's working, what isn't working. And bring your investors and your shareholders and even suppliers and key customers, bring them on the journey. They know you're a startup, they want to help. So I think those 4 things are the things I look for most in terms of mindset for a startup founder, and just the ability to actually deliver on the job. Because ultimately a founder is a CEO of a small business. And I think there's a lot of ego stuff that can come into play in terms of Instagram and looking good. But I think I was saying to you before, a follower is not a customer and a like is not a sale. So if you don't have a business mindset, a growth mindset, a KPI mindset, you've got to take yourself out of it and treat it as a business and really honour the business and honour the vision, not so much the minutiae. And so just stay flexible and just stay hungry. I think the founder is the CEO initially until they staff up, but they're the perspective giver and they're the priority setter. So the founder's role is to really juggle everything, but also just be the one who's clearest on the end point. So the vision is theirs. So that needs to inform them the practical elements, like the priorities. Like if you've got 5 competing requests for features of your app, so if your research says, look, we need to build this, which one are you going to do first? What's your process for prioritizing and ranking them? Is that feature more important than a salesperson? I'd say get the salesperson first. They've got enough to sell to pique the interest of customers. I think that the founder has got to be the single point of truth as regards the vision and the priorities to get to that vision. Look, this is a very good topic. I mean, Steve Jobs had that famous quote where you don't hire somebody to tell them what to do, you hire somebody for them to tell you what to do. And he's right. Look, in terms of having the right people around you, it is the most important thing. From day one, you need to make sure that everybody is a hard worker, that they're experts in what they do, and they are telling you what to do in a way, passionate, and that I don't know whether they've got equity or whatever the arrangement is, just to make sure that they're feeling seen and rewarded. But above all else, make sure that they're not adding to your pain. So your network of immediate people working with you on this project, they've got to be all in and they've got to be supporting you. If they become a pain point or there's lack of trust or something, then you need to nip that in the bud and get somebody else in that role who can do it in a more supportive way. I think life is conflict. I think Freud said that, and conflict is inevitable. But I think your role as the founder and maybe the CEO in those early days is to make sure that everyone feels heard, but it is your vision, it is your business, you are the final decision maker. If you're getting to the point where there's somebody not respecting that or really trying to drive the bus, there can only be one driver of the bus. So you do actually need to make roles very clear. And we do have a process for this in terms of ideal org chart and roles and responsibilities linked to KPIs. So there are processes for making it less personal and less emotional, and just making sure that everybody's in their lane and that they're delivering to their KPIs and to the things that you agreed on your SOAP, your strategy on a page. These are the quarterly focus areas. If somebody's coming in over the top of you and there's a personality clash, you need to address that pretty quickly. Look, it can be very, very painful, like to actually have to address human elements. The hardest part of any job is the human element. My hat is off permanently to HR managers and recruiters, and I just find it so hard to manage people. But you have to be a little bit ruthless at that level. If there's too much ego, too much clashing, too many competing interests or priorities, and nobody's making the road clear for everyone. I think when two people clash at the senior level, it muddies the waters for everyone. culturally as well as in terms of what is expected. So you do have to find a way to take care of that. So once GoFetch was up and running, they were probably the 3 best years of my life. I loved it. So we expanded out of Melbourne CBD into all of Melbourne, and then we hired a team. So I ended up having some really good people with me on the journey. We had an operations guy on the dashboard, really making sure that all the jobs matched smoothly, and we just started to soar in relation to customer satisfaction, financial growth, the features that we built. We ended up hiring 2 permanent internal tech people instead of external suppliers. So we could just swing on our chairs and talk about, tech and what we need to build most, or what feature needs to be developed because it's becoming a pain point for our customers. So it was all just very organic and very lovely for 3 years. We expanded into Brisbane next, which was great. So flew up there, got onto Channel 10 somehow, and then that took off quite quickly. The app was working well, the system was proven, it was nice and robust, the user experience was great. So Brisbane was next, and we ended up getting Amcal chemists on board, and they became really big fans. Then we did Sydney, and the 3 cities I had before I sold it was Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, but really, really happy with that trajectory. And the vision was living, it was happening. And at that stage, we were getting a lot of investment nibbles and even purchase nibbles. So I flew to London for 4 days because we had somebody who wanted to buy the back end. So the code became quite valuable in relation to just how many features it had compared to any other peer-to-peer delivery platform. A lot of our competitors like Zoom2U and Sherpa, they had permanent staff doing the deliveries and a few peer-to-peer, organic fetchers, but they didn't have a full peer-to-peer model. Ours was the most peer-to-peer, I think ever, in terms of just every job it went to the nearest fetcher geographically to the job. If they didn't want it, it would go to somebody else, but we didn't force jobs on anyone. So it had a very, very fluid and organic feel to it. So we were just monitoring the operations of our business. It just ran itself, which was an incredible feeling. And that became quite valuable. So I flew to London, pitched to a couple of high net wealths and somebody wanting to take it through all of Europe. So that was very exciting, just to get that validation. They were very interested as well. So we did sign a heads of agreement in London, flew back thinking, do we sell yet or do we just keep going? And maybe this would be worth more in a year's time. But it started to get to a point where I was seeing an exit event, and I was seeing, I was very excited by the growth of the business and what it might now be valued at. I'm not sure I want that bit on tape. I moved to regional Victoria, and I was working as a management consultant during COVID. So I was doing part Melbourne, part here, but I really loved the discipline that management consulting has. There's just a process for everything. And it's very rewarding to help small businesses with a toolkit of processes. I thought that was directly applicable to the startup space, and quite frankly, something that was missing. So I think the startup space, as I mentioned, was fairly immature when I was running GoFetch, and I didn't really have a ecosystem to lean on. When I finished working as a management consultant, and I still had a passion for the startup scene, in 22 I thought, I'm going to go back in and just see how I can help as an exited founder with everything that I went through, as well as practical things from the consulting side. And I quickly realised that some of the processes around value proposition, sales funnel setup, cost of acquisition versus lifetime value, financial acumen, reading a balance sheet, cash flow, P&L. There's some fundamentals that a lot of these founders don't have. So it's been lovely to actually go back into the startup world with experience firsthand through GoFetch, but also bringing in a bit of rigor and a bit of process, and that's resonated. So I've been mentoring with Mayfly Ventures, Founder Lab, Startup Central Victoria here in Bendigo. There's quite a few institutions, the Startup Network, run by Vicky Sterling. She's amazing. I've been doing a lot of stuff with them in the last few years that I've really enjoyed, but it does feel like I'm almost giving back because of my knowledge across consulting, coaching, and growth, how to grow something. So that's been lovely, and I do feel that the Australian ecosystem is super healthy and maturing very, very quickly. But the one thing I find that I am hearing from founders that they're most grateful for is process. So it's one thing to launch a business, but what are your 5 things this quarter? What have you got the team working on? What are your target stretch celebrate milestones? What's your strategy on a page? What's your business roadmap? What's your call to action? What's your value proposition as regards your unique selling proposition? What are you doing tactically where you're pushing stuff out versus pull strategies? What's your networking look like? What are you doing in terms of getting fans and advocates to start bringing business into you? What are your suppliers saying about you? It's just a lovely circular. It's almost, in my mind, it's quite linear, the journey to exit. But taking founders on that journey is just, it's a privilege, and it's just fun. Like, people are hungry for knowledge. They're grateful for the help, but more than anything, they're very capable already. And most of the founders I'm working with have got great ideas. They just need the confidence, and they need to be reminded that they're pretty good already. A lot of these foundations are doing really well. They're very generous. For example, the Startup Network they've got events for partners, they've got events for founders, they've got events for sponsors. So they do really work as a facilitator, where they're basically introducing money and rigor to the founders. So pitch nights, for example, are just fantastic. And then I think people like Mayfly Ventures and Founder Lab, they're the same. They're very good at reducing the product development side of building an app or a business. They're very good at introducing you to the venture capital side. So I do think there's a lot of organisations now emerging that are effectively peak bodies for the startup world that are doing a great job already. I think that what I'm enjoying, or what they're enjoying from me, is the rigor and the process. So when I do presentations for the Startup Network, for example, one of them was, lessons learned from GoFetch. One was pitching, presenting, and basically getting your messaging reduced down to something that customers want and employees value. All of that sort of stuff, I think, is being valued and maybe missing from these cohorts, is just a little bit of structure regarding the process to go and do certain things. So I think that there's absolutely the awareness of this is what you need to step through on the way to exiting. But within that, at the granular level, what are the things I should be doing in relation to things like reading a balance sheet, educating myself about the financials of a business, elements of the sales funnel that need work, how to fix and identify and fix things quickly on the job. With what a founder goes through, I do think it's becoming clearer what the journey looks like, but speed is a big problem. The biggest thing I had was the amount of funding that we raised was incremental. We never got that gigantic investor. So 2 million in the bank, hire staff, you've got a runway that is controlled. When you're forever going back in hand, or if you're cash flow negative, it's a different story. Like there's a thing called ramen positive, which is basically where the business is making enough money to pay for you and your bills, and you can put food on the table, but that's it. So getting to ramen positive is a good thing. People think it's, you're underperforming, but if you get to the stage where you don't have to go back to a day job, that's progress. So being ramen positive is good, but yes, getting things done faster is absolutely vital. I do think a lot of founders love the culture of being part of a co-working space, and they love the startup ecosystem, but they're not aggressive enough in the realization that they need to progress out of that and make some money and turn this into a real business. So I think the trap of being stuck in the culture of the startup ecosystem, it's a pretty lovely culture. Like I've been to many of these co-working spaces and cohorts, and it's fantastic, but you do need to graduate out of that, and you do need somebody to guide you on that journey. So I do think some of these accelerator programs are just fantastic. I'm involved with one next month called the 48-Hour Accelerator, which is run by a lady named Pip Stocks from Brandhook. She's incredible. So Mayfly put me in front of them, and I'm going to be presenting on the last day of this accelerator. But that's a 2-day accelerator at a very good price point instead of a 6-week or 6-month accelerator program. So I do think the accelerator space and the incubator space, they're evolving as well. But I think you're right. The end goal here is to get this done fast. Like turn it into a cash flow positive business, and then decide whether you want to stay and run it or step out. But you've got to have a money event or an exit event as fast as you can. I do think brands look a little tired if they have been around the startup ecosystem for some time but aren't really going further. I think that's a red flag to investors. So you need to move quickly to stay current, to stay appealing to investors, but more than anything to transition out of a startup headspace into a business headspace. I think the missing link is the investor side. I don't think you can get the speed without the money. So I think where Australia is still a bit murky is what is the best revenue model for me? Is it crowdsourcing? Is it a high net wealth individual, an angel? Is it a VC? I really don't know how that feeds in clearly enough. I don't really know what they're looking for. I mean, at the presentation I did recently, they did all present about their model, but I still didn't really know, of all the founders in the room, which one would I match to that model or that model or that model? Do you know what I mean? Yes. I don't think that's clear enough in Australia, maybe in the world. I don't really think founders understand how to build a relationship with the money people. And that's the handbrake in terms of the speed to market or speed to growth or speed to exit. I don't think the relationship with money and the investors is clear enough. I think that goes back to what I said very early on today, is you've got to have passion for your project, but you've got to pivot. You've got to be flexible. It's still going to be GoFetch, even if you're now working with trucking companies instead of somebody who left their phone at the gym. It's still your business, and it's still, you're just listening to the market. So you do have to be passionate, but you can't be pig-headed. You cannot be stubborn in a dynamic environment like the startup world. You've got to listen to the market, to the customers, to your staff. You've got to really make it, you're the leader and you're the decision maker, but you do absolutely need everyone else involved and passionate as well. So your passion shouldn't be any greater than theirs. If everyone's on the journey and they're all wanting this thing to work, your role is to just prioritize, to rank, to basically control the flow of it, but the passion should be everyone's. And above all else, be flexible and pivot many, many times, because it's no use flogging a dead horse, and you can waste a lot of money if you're passionate about something that is just not growing. So temper your passion with practical things like KPIs, like the books, the finances, numbers never lie. Go to your data, do your research, let the data guide you more than intuition or passion. So when I finished at GoFetch, I did management consulting in the city, and that was a really lovely experience in terms of just being assigned a suite of small businesses to help. I'm now trying to apply that same discipline to the startup space, and I do think it matches quite neatly, because a startup is effectively a small business, even though it's not cash flow positive, and some of the ideas are a bit more creative. The discipline is the same in terms of the steps to growth. So yeah, Greywoods Growth Coaching is my business now. Greywoods is named after the property up here, and I've been doing this for 4 years, and it's going really well. I've got a good mix of regional small businesses and regional and metro startups. But yeah, I really do think it's resonating, it's working, and I think we're adding value. I think the most important thing to realise when you're engaging a coach is that it's still your business. It's still your idea. What a coach does is just adds rigour to your day. I found when I was a founder that my days would be quite reactive. You'd get into the office or wherever and you'd just be fixing stuff. What a coach does is kind of flips that and gives you the processes to work in very clear sprints of work. So you've got 90 days to get this done. These are the 5 things. Nothing else can come in over the top of those. You've got a strategy on a page. You've got a Gantt chart. You've got all the roles and responsibilities nice and tight, and you're all working towards these things. I just think the rigour of having clear processes, it's almost like you don't know what you don't know. Getting a coach keeps you on track. It's your business, it's your team. We just do, every fortnight we do 90 minutes together, one in person, one online, and then obviously you can call anytime outside of that. But really, those 90 minutes are just perfect for giving you very clear actions, clear priorities, just getting your thinking straight, taking away the overwhelm, making sure that you're working on the right things, so freeing up your time. It's just more than anything, it's comfort. I think most of the founders I work with are relieved that they've got somebody guiding them in relation to what they think are the immediate next steps to growth. So yeah, it's absolutely vital, I think, to get that external advice. Sure, I've got a really lovely suite of clients, and they've got some great ideas out there too. So the 2 that I'm loving at the moment, there's one called Lulabelle's Francophiles, and this lady is obsessed with France, but she's Australian. But I think she does have a French background. Her name's Pritchard, which is a French name. But Lulabelle's Francophiles is a podcast, so she turned her passion for France into a podcast during COVID, and suddenly she had 50,000 downloads. And she's big in America and Canada, and it's quite interesting to see where her audience comes from. But what she's been working with me is just how to monetize that audience and how to turn this into a business. So we've now got an online shop. We've had celebrity chefs like Gabrielle Gatte have got right behind her, and they're really advocating for her. She's now doing walking tours of Normandy. She's got French apparel available online. She's got French cooking classes that she does available to members of this site. So really, we've just helped grow her audience. She's got 25,000 Instagram followers now. So really, she's doing everything right, and she's growing. She's got, so with Louise and Lulabelle's Francophiles, it's growing really well, and it's great to see how hungry she is for information. The only thing that was missing for her was process. So that's one. And another one that I'm really enjoying is Bespoke Gourmet by Blake. And this guy he's a head chef on the Mornington Peninsula, but he's got this business where he's going into high-end properties to do everything, all the cooking, the cleaning. So he'll basically cater a high-end event. So beautiful meals, like this guy's, Michelin star level. And he comes to your home and lets you relax and enjoy the night without having to be the cook as well as the entertainer. And it is working. So he's basically got everything in place now to really succeed. Also very good at listening. So he's engaged a coach. He doesn't see having a coach as an expense. It's an investment. And quite honestly, the money that we're making him now more than covers our costs. So he's net neutral at the least, and he's growing. So really lovely story with the two of those. But both interesting founders, because they're really hungry for knowledge, and they don't have a lot of ego. They want to be told what the next step is. They're just looking for that guidance, but very capable. But I commend them for actually going to get external help because it has sped everything up for them. For me, I think having a coach or a consultant or an advisor is absolutely vital. You really don't know what you don't know. And what these people bring, if they're worth their salt, is process. Whether it's lead generation, creating time, getting you out of the doing, setting up your sales funnel, mapping your sales process, articulating your value proposition, key messages to potential investors. Every single step that you're going to go through as a founder, they will have a process for it or a template. They'll have a shortcut for it. So in addition to just being able to soundboard your ideas and rank them, you should really get a lovely sprint of work that is the right things to do in the right order to get that result. So I think getting a coach is vital, and there's so many affordable coaches out there in the startup space now. Quite often we do pro bono work where we'll go and present something. So you just got access to really lovely information. But when you are working one-on-one with somebody, it's quite an intimate relationship. You really do develop a lot of trust in your coach, and the coach gets a lot of affinity for you and really wants you to work as well. So I think having two people, both smart and both really vested in the growth of your business, it's great. And like I said before, the expense of hiring a coach is offset by the growth they achieve for you. So very quickly, they've made revenue increases for your business that offset any fees that they might be charging, and more, ideally. Yeah, so you really shouldn't see a coach as an expense, but as an investment. It's that simple. You really, you will make great strides, more revenue very quickly by getting somebody who's connected, who has process and discipline, and helps you with the rigor of running a business. GoFetch is a peer-to-peer delivery app that has got more features than anything else in the land. So it is very tech-rich, very asset-rich, but ultimately it just gives you absolute freedom. You can get anything delivered by anyone at any time of the day. Greywoods is a growth specialist. So we basically, we help founders and small business owners to grow very quickly. So we bring rigor and discipline and knowledge and process to people with great ideas. We specialise in regional Victoria because there's a lot of great ideas up here that really haven't been listened to, or they haven't had access to investment. A lot of ag tech businesses doing really well, a lot of regional small towns, they've got some great ideas, and I'm loving being the go-to business coach for regional small businesses and regional startups. I'm working with Startup Central Victoria, Farmers to Founders, some really lovely organisations, engaging coaches like me to just help founders get off the ground quickly. So Greywoods is the go-to growth coach for regional Victorian small businesses and startups. So in the regions, the diversity of ideas is just as rich as the city. There is a lot of agricultural focus. So there's some companies like Premier Ag, Precision Agriculture. They're all doing some really cool stuff with satellite technology that's mapping soil health, and they'll basically help you level out your pH levels across your field for higher yields. There's some really good aqua engineering products that basically help water irrigation. So there is a lot of wonderful tech emerging in the agriculture space, but there's also other ideas up here that are just phenomenal. Recently I heard a pitch from somebody doing a streaming platform for regional content. So we haven't had anything in Australia since McLeod's Daughters in terms of just having content that's got to do with farms and people living in the bush. This streaming service is going to change that and just have content that is purely for people living in regional Australia. So that's tech as well as media. So that's a very clever idea. There's also, I was working with some photographers they specialise in landscape photography, and they've just got these incredible images on catalogue as well as bespoke commissioned work where they can help regional newspapers with content and with great photography. But they've kind of appified their service. So basically you can engage a photographer through the app and they send the job, almost like a peer-to-peer photography network. They send it to the closest photographer to that particular site. Just very clever stuff happening up here. So very, very rich in ideas, female-led founders as well. There's female farmer founders. There's a lot of stuff that I've been privy to in terms of having access to their pitch nights and what have you that are very inspiring. So Launch Victoria now has a regional hub or regional dedicated team looking for those ideas out in the bush. So I think Greywoods is fitting very well into all of that as a potential coach to help these businesses, once they're funded, to really to accelerate and grow. The three things that regional founders need the most, I think, is access to capital. So that they need for their ideas to be seen by high net worth individuals and the VCs. There don't seem to be too many out here who are very well versed in the startup ecosystem. So they just need exposure, really, to money, just so that they might stand a chance of getting funded. The second thing they need is support. They seem to be doing it all themselves. It's quite hard to go and find support, even if it's somebody doing your social media. They're going to be kilometres away. So everything is a Zoom call or what have you. So there just seems to be access to support is a little bit harder for them. So I think having a breakdown of who's available out there to help them, that could really be just a little a team, a ready-to-go team, ready to support them would be really good. And I think the third thing that they need is structure. They probably more than city folk, I don't think that they've had the exposure to the startup world, and they don't really know how to start anything. So Startup Central Victoria is great. There's accelerators happening, which are terrific. So look, this is all changing very quickly, but I would say that there's a level of sophistication that's evolving now in metro cities that maybe isn't up here, and I think that they just need to be paired with somebody to help them to really get it off the ground, apply the same disciplines that city startups do to getting seen, funded, launched very quickly. In terms of how the government might help address some of these issues, I think number one is to start working with local councils. So up here, I'm in the Hepburn Shire Council. They do have a business networking schedule now that they didn't used to have. I think having a startup highlight in there would be good. It would be good to know that you can go to your local council if you're living in the regions and go to a pitch night or come and see city speakers come and tell you about how to launch a startup. I think education needs to happen, and I do think that councils need to be quite heavily involved in that. The second thing is there's a lot of amazing things like Startup Central Victoria that came out of Launch Vic. There's one for Central Victoria, there's one for Gippsland. There are a lot of hubs now emerging that are funded by the government, but nobody knows about them. So I do think that the the promotion of those things needs to be expanded. I would love to see in my local paper an ad just saying, do you have a startup idea? This is who you talk to. I don't think anyone knows the first step to making their idea a reality in the bush. They probably feel like they've got to go to Melbourne or something. So number 2 would be that. And number 3, I think, would be access to coaches and access to people who've done it before. Just really promoting the fact that there are people living in the regions now with a lot of intellectual property, a lot of experience that are here to help, and promoting those businesses, linking them or introducing them to startup founders, I think would be a really good first step. My 5-year plan now, I'm treating Greywoods as a startup. I want Greywoods Consulting to be the go-to business coach for anybody not living in a metro area. So whether it's outback Queensland or outback WA, I would love Greywoods to expand to be a very well-known business coach and consulting service that specialises in growth. No nonsense, colour by numbers, just follow these processes and you will grow. I'd love to help regional small businesses and regional founders and basically become a household name for those. The first thing I would do if I had an idea in the climate space was try to get funding. So there's got to be some money lying around in relation to Climate 200 or some of these peak bodies that are funding good initiatives. I think education about where to access funding or grants that are sustainability related. I think that's number 1. And number 2 is finding a regional startup cohort like Startup Central Victoria to actually get into one of the accelerator programs, to see whether they can introduce you to people in the climate space that might be ready to invest or might monitor you until a certain stage and then they'll come in and buy it. I think getting access to that line of sight is what they need. Okay, if you've got an idea and you're ready to jump and you really want to give your startup a go, the 3 things I would look at first is competitor analysis. So just making sure that you're solving a problem and making sure that you're solving a problem people want solved. It's one thing to solve a problem, but would people pay for your solution? So I would definitely do some research. And there are some amazing research platforms out there. There's a company called Heatseeker who are doing amazing things in the pre-money stage where you can actually get your idea out to them and they can do some testing for you with A/B testing with some of their cohorts or their people have signed on to participate. So very good research platforms out there, all AI based as well. So very clever stuff. So do research your target audience, research the problem that you're solving, the size of the problem. You don't want to jump and then find out there's actually no market for your idea. So number 1 is research. Number 2 is money. So make sure that you're funded to give yourself as long a roadmap as possible. So rather than going cap in hand every 6 months to your investors to top up or to go and find new ones, that's a very, very exhausting process, I know firsthand. So try to raise as much as you can in that first instance. Don't be afraid to be diluted, because being diluted means you've got less percentage of a bigger thing. It's better to have 60% of something that's going to work than 100% of something that's going to fail. So don't be afraid of dilution and try to get as much money as you can in that first raise. And the third thing is surround yourself with good people. So just make sure that you've got an ideal org chart so that as you grow, who are your first hires and who do you think they might be? Who can you start the journey with right now? It can be a fairly lonely thing being a founder. So having good advisors at the very least is really, really good. Have people who are connected to your industry. So if for example, you were doing a GoFetch, is there somebody in the logistics space that can come in and help you? We ended up getting Charles Thompson, who was ex-Australia Post, on our board, and he was just so lovely. But get high-level support because their networks will spread the word for you. So surround yourself with good people, get advisors, and get a coach. Get a coach straight away. Networking is everything, and it's not what you think. It's not going to like an Amway function. It's not an endless round of cocktail parties and breakfasts. Networking is just getting on the phone. There's a technique called BLG, breakfast, lunch, grow, and it's just go and have a coffee with somebody, and they might then spread the word for you. So under networking, you've got potential suppliers, potential customers, Facebook groups, LinkedIn groups, associations. You've got people who might have done it before. So, for example, legends. Like don't be afraid to approach somebody fairly famous who's done something pretty amazing, because they might be willing to help. And then, get your list of clients and where you're going to find them. So networking can be fairly structured. It doesn't have to just be attending events. It can just be getting your name out there through the digital world, doing a webinar, doing a speech on a topic that people might want to hear about. You can really build your LinkedIn profile, your business profile very quickly without taking up too much time. But look, networking is everything. So the push is marketing and sales, the pull is networking. If you can actually get people coming to you because somebody has mentioned you or given your card out, or become a referrer, even get as many people spreading the word as possible. And you've got to treat networking like a job. Just get on the phone. Don't be afraid to send an email and then follow up with a phone call. It's the hardest part of any job as a founder, is the salesy bit and the networking bit, but it is also the most easy way to get money in the door. The most important part about storytelling is it gives you the opportunity to really explain your vision very clearly. It also humanises the brand. People put a face to the brand. So super important to actually get those two things out. There's brand strategy and reducing your brand to an essence, but then there's the story, the brand story. And it generally does link very tightly with the founder. So your story needs to come into it. So getting your brand story right, it's actually important for potential customers, but also investors. So if they understand where you came from, what problems you were facing that led you to create this idea, there's a direct link between you as a person and the solution that you've created. And I think that's very, very powerful. I think investors as well, they do want to see a founder who's got a great story. So just make sure that you're clear on your story as it relates to how you came up with this idea and launched it. There's a great book I just read called Key Person of Influence, and it's about the role of the founder and the fact that you can't avoid it. Your story is basically why people want to buy your product. The three most important parts of getting the story right is the why. So you might have heard of Simon Sinek. He's always going on about the why. Why did you do this? Why did you create this? It's not just a soundbite. It's actually super important that you're clear on it and that you can explain it. The second thing is that you need to create an emotional connection with your brand story. So every purchase is an emotional purchase. It could be a bill that is more expensive than you thought. That's anger. It could be a Taylor Swift ticket, and that could be excitement. But there is an emotional connection to every single purchase. So what is the emotional connector of your brand story that just might get people hooked? I think that those two things are super important. And the third thing I would say is your story helps you stand out in a crowded market. So your story is a differentiator. So just make sure that your story and your brand have been developed in a way that are different to your competitors, and that your story resonates in a way that they don't. And I don't think your story ever gets tired either. Like if it's authentic, then there's no denying it. It's a truth. So my 5-year plan is for the next few years, I really want to grow Greywoods to be the go-to regional business coach. I want to get it to the point where I can actually sell it or franchise it, because I do think there will be sustainably a demand for coaching in regional locations. So I do want to leave that as my legacy. I've got a place in Bali, and I think at the end of the 5 years, I'd like to see myself over there a bit more. So whether that's in 3 years or 5, I think that's the end goal. Back to my childhood in the Pilbara, we did spend a lot of time in Java as well. So I speak Indonesian, and I did Indonesian at school and university, and I just love the country, all of it, like Sumatra, Java, Bali. Some of the other outer islands are just phenomenal. Sumba is incredible. So look, I do think I'll spend a lot more time in Indonesia, and then hit back here. So in relation to your point about burnout, you've got to really watch that. So it's hard when you've got a passion project and you've left the comfort and security of another job to do this, and you do get swept up in the pace of it and the urgency of it, but you do need a life. You need to block it off. In the mornings, I use calendar blocking, so I will block personal time like a meeting. So whether it's a walk or something, I'll break up my day, and I will not cancel that, just like I wouldn't cancel a personal trainer. You've got to treat your leisure time with as much discipline as your work time, or you'll just go crazy. So just look after your health, heaps of water, try to get some sleep, and make time for fun as well. You get to a stage quickly enough where you've got a team behind you, and then you can really structure your day. But in the early days where you don't have that, just don't burn out, because it's very easy to do. That's right. I've got a couple of clients who are overseas. So one of them's in London. So I talk to her at 10 p.m. And if I worked all day waiting for that meeting, then I've worked a 16-hour day. So what I do is I take 4 hours off in the afternoon on the day that I've got her. So I'll have from 3 till 7 off. So I'll work the morning, and then I'll give myself permission to have that afternoon off, because I'm going to be working into the night. So you just have to, I think in Australia as well, maybe India, we're very hard on ourselves, and it's hard to let yourself have free time without feeling guilty about it. But you've got to get rid of that. Like, you've got to have a life. There's a lot of founders that don't have the discipline, and I don't think that they really manage their day like super tightly. But then you've got others who are very, very good, very professional, but maybe too good. And I want them to have more time off. But yeah, it is. I always see some that are not doing the right things first. They're focused on something I personally wouldn't worry about just yet. And then you've got the others who are just guns, but they're almost too efficient. And you want them to slow down and pace themselves. So yeah, you're right. It's hard to think about your legacy, because I don't know about you, but I always feel I'm still young and I've got ages to go, but I probably don't. So it's a good question. I think my legacy will be having a go. I think I've always had a crack. Even in my corporate life, I moved around a lot. I think I was always curious and onto the next thing. But I think with GoFetch, we did really well, and I'm really proud of that and what we managed to achieve in those 4 years. In other ways that I'll be remembered, I think hopefully as a kind person and somebody who is generous with their time, and I think ethically was really solid. And I think the final thing is that I'm a good team player in relation to just understanding the bigger picture. So I can contextualize myself in amongst other things quite well, I think. So I think the teams that I worked with, I really enjoyed, and I hope they'll say the same about me.